In today's video, you're going to learn about one of the most popular options for worship teams who want to set up a software-based live keys rig. We're going to talk about Ableton Live and why you should use it for your worship key setup at church. Hey guys, I'm David from SundaySounds.com, where our focus is making it easier for worship teams to use software like Ableton Live for their live keys sounds. Before we get into the topic of today's video, if you're an Ableton Live user, be sure to subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell because we put out new tutorials to make it easier for you to achieve great results all the time. We also have some free Ableton Live worship patches for you, so check out the link in the description to grab those. So today we're talking about Ableton Live as the center of your worship keys rig. A few weeks back, we put out a video of the similar topic focused on MainStage 3, and MainStage is a great option as the brain or the center of your keys rig if you want to use software. But Ableton Live is a compelling option as well. So in this video, we're going to get into some of the reasons why Ableton Live might be the right choice for you. Make sure you watch through to the end because we're going to get into the specifics of where Ableton Live is strongest and also give you a few things to watch out for, some reasons that it might not be the right way for you to go. Let's get into it. So first off, let's just talk about Ableton Live in general. What is Ableton Live? Ableton Live is a really unique piece of music software because it's both a fully featured recording platform, a DAW that can record your band in a studio context, and it's also really popular for live performances because of its innovative session view, which allows you to dynamically fire audio clips. It's really popular with DJs, with electronic music producers. It's a really versatile tool. And because it can sort of operate on an arrangement, a timeline, or be used to improvise in the moment, it's really, really popular across all sorts of different applications, both in the studio and on stage. Ableton Live is now at version 10, so it's been around for a long time. It's known for its really minimal design, really clean look, and it sort of looks like a spreadsheet. There's lots of different compartments or areas of the screen where you can hide things, tuck things away, so you only see what you want to see. You can get into the very specific details if you want, but you can also kind of tuck those out of sight. One of the main things Ableton Live has a reputation for is being very reliable, which is one of the reasons it's so popular for many live performers and musicians. It's a very lean program from a CPU perspective. It's got some great built-in compression. It's really good at streaming samples from disk and managing CPU resources pretty efficiently. Now we're going to get into how that impacts your keys rig specifically a little bit later in the video, but that's one of the things that's made Ableton Live so popular is because it really does take the live performer into consideration in terms of the architecture of how it's set up behind the scenes. So before we talk about exactly why you might choose to use Ableton Live for your keys rig, let's compare it to the traditional model of buying a hardware keyboard with a bunch of built-in sounds and then using those sounds to set up your entire keys rig for your church. So in the hardware world, you're going to be buying a keyboard. It's going to come with sounds, and then you're going to use those sounds, different patches, different presets, maybe layering them together to set up the different sounds that are going to be available to you or maybe the volunteers on your worship team. Now, there are amazing hardware keyboards out there, and it's not a bad option to go, but oftentimes it can be more expensive. Depending on the keyboard, it might not be very customizable. You might not be able to add additional sounds to that keyboard over time. You can be locked in to what is present in the original keyboard as you bought it. Contrasting that to a software-based rig like we're talking about today in Ableton Live, you have lots of customizability, the ability to run pretty much any third-party plugin that you'd like to create and tweak your own sounds and come up with really creative ways of setting you or the keys player at your church up with great sounds that are possible to be played well during a live performance. So sometimes in the software world, it can take more work to get set up front because there aren't those guardrails that the hardware comes built in with. But if you're willing to invest the time, oftentimes you can save some money, and it's a little bit more of a future-proof solution because you can always expand the palette of sounds and features and effects that are available to your software rig. Now, for many of you, you may have already had a little bit of Ableton Live experience in the form of receiving a copy of Ableton Live LITE. I remember way back in the day, I bought a keyboard at a Best Buy. Do you guys remember when Best Buys were trying to take down Guitar Center and they had music stores in the back corner? maybe not. It only lasted like 6 months. It wasn't a good idea. But I went in when they were closing those out and I bought a MIDI controller on clearance, but it came with a version of Ableton Live LITE. You could run, I think, 4, maybe 6 tracks at a time. The great thing about those LITE licenses is they do give you a good taste of what Ableton Live feels like. And I will say that Ableton Live has a very specific feel. The workflows, where things are, the way things are laid out intuitively, all feels just distinctly Ableton-y. Is that a word? It's not really a word, but you know what I mean. It feels like no other DAW. It doesn't feel like Logic. It doesn't feel like Pro Tools. It doesn't feel like MainStage or Reason. It's very much Ableton Live has its own sort of thing. Now that can be a little bit divisive because people that like Ableton really, really like Ableton, and folks that don't like Ableton kind of really don't like Ableton Live. It's not for everybody. It can take a little bit of time to get into. It's not necessarily the most accessible platform, but that's because it's so powerful and flexible. So if you're willing to put the time into figuring out how to use it, it can be a really, really powerful tool. Okay, so let's talk about why churches love Ableton Live. Now, traditionally, the answer has been one word 3 times. Tracks, tracks, tracks. Churches love to run their backing tracks in Ableton Live. If you are a worship leader or a volunteer at your church, this is probably where you first became acquainted with the name of the software. And maybe you've been using Ableton Live for a while to run your tracks. It's really, really good at that. You can do it in session view and dynamically switch between different parts of a song, or you can do it in arrangement view and set up all sorts of really cool automation, set up loop points. It's really, really powerful, and Ableton Live is great for running tracks. But today we're not talking about tracks alone, we're talking about Ableton Live in a worship keys context. But it's important to acknowledge that many of you already have an Ableton Live license at your church because you are using it to run your backing tracks. In the same way, many of you are also probably using Ableton Live to control other components of the worship setup at your church. Maybe you're automating your presentation software. Maybe you're sending cues to your lighting rig. You can even automate functions on the soundboard, all from within Ableton Live. So tracks and automation, Ableton Live is an amazing tool, and I would say probably the best tool out there on the market for that sort of robust, granular automation control of a bunch of different things. Bringing them into one space and controlling them from Ableton Live is a great option. So then whether you know that you want that type of granular control or not, Ableton Live can also be a really powerful host for your live key sounds. Now, if you are running tracks or automation in Ableton Live, you can actually run your keys rig within the same Ableton Live set. And that can open up some really cool possibilities for you to actually automate things within your keys rig, being able to automatically change patches at the right moment, open up a filter over a pre-chorus, increase or decrease the amount of a delay effect on a piano. You can go wild with automation if you're already doing that work to set up tracks or lyric or lighting automation. But even if you're not running tracks, even if you don't need any automation at all, Ableton Live is still a really, really good option for you as the host of your keys rig, of your keys sounds. And the reasons why is because it is really lean. It's designed for CPU performance. It's optimized to make good use of the resources available on your computer, and you can manage lots of different keys patches and have lots of different sounds available to you all within Ableton Live without worrying about overloading your computer. So then let's talk about Ableton Live versus MainStage for a moment, because this is the question we get asked most often at Sunday Sounds. Why would I use MainStage over Ableton Live? Or why would I use Ableton Live over MainStage? Because Ableton Live is designed to cover this broad spectrum of use cases, from a production or recording environment all the way to live DJing, electronic music, and lots of places in between, there are lots of features that Ableton Live has that you probably just won't need if you're gonna be using it as a keys rig alone. But with that being said, the features it does have that you can make a part of your live keys rig can be really powerful. The main place I think that Ableton Live really excels is in improvisation and flexibility during live performance if you are a keys player. Inside of our Sunday Keys template for Ableton, we've got tons of preset patches and powerful sounds already dialed in, but we also have what we call the quick select area of Sunday Keys for Ableton, which allows you to dynamically pull in or out any sound that you'd like by just choosing that instrument in real time. So you can actually build dynamically or bring things down in the moment and be very responsive to what your worship band is doing. So there's really two specific scenarios where I think Ableton Live is a really compelling choice for you as a keys player. The first is when you do want lots of automation and pre-programmed control over the transitions and various moments in your key setup. Maybe you are running tracks, maybe you are sending cues out to your presentation or lighting software. If you want to take the time up front to program in all of those changes, it's a really powerful tool for you to have all that work done and then literally just be able to play keys without having to worry about anything else during a song. And then the second ideal scenario, I think, is sort of the polar opposite of that. If you need lots of flexibility in the moment, if you don't necessarily have a really concrete roadmap of where your band is going to go during a song or a specific set list, Ableton Live is really, really powerful as an improvisational tool because you can bring things in or out selectively in the moment without disrupting the general flow of what you have going on. It's that middle ground where you need to do sort of the day-to-day planning or the week-to-week planning, where I think MainStage might have the upper hand on Ableton Live in some ways. MainStage is a little bit better at exporting out stuff from a specific concert. You can pull it into a different concert. You can export the workspaces on screen, save different MIDI layouts and all that sort of stuff inside of a MainStage concert. And in Ableton Live, you're a little bit more locked into sort of a master set list methodology where you each week start with the same set and then move things around as you need them. Both options can be workable, but if you are one who just needs to say, I need these 5 songs this week, I programmed them a month ago and I just want to pull them in, that process is probably going to be a little bit quicker for you inside of MainStage versus Ableton Live. So with that being said, let's lay out a few things to watch out for as you consider using Ableton Live for your keys rig. One of the main reasons that you should make sure Ableton Live is the right choice for you is that it can be a little bit more intimidating to a new volunteer when comparing Ableton Live to something like MainStage. Because MainStage has that really cool workspace area where you can customize the visual to say and do whatever you want it to do, you can make things really palatable and accessible and easy for a volunteer to understand. In Ableton Live, while you do have arrangement view and session view, both of those options aren't really very customizable outside of that other than some color coding and things like that. So it's going to look more like Ableton Live no matter what you choose to do. So if you've got somebody who's brand new to the position, brand new to worship keys, and you hand them Ableton Live running in session view, it's going to look a little bit more like a spreadsheet than a musical instrument. So that's not a reason not to use Ableton Live. You just want to make sure you take your volunteers into consideration. And if you're the worship leader at your church, make sure you plan out some time to set your volunteers up for success and explain the how, the what, and the why behind using Ableton Live for your key sounds. The second thing to talk about is price. Even Ableton Live Intro costs more than 3 times as much as MainStage, and Ableton Live Standard and Suite are even more expensive than that. So there can be more of an upfront investment if you're looking at Ableton Live versus MainStage specifically. Now, I will say that it's a little bit of a straw man to say that MainStage is less expensive because in order to use MainStage, you have to own a Mac computer. And generally, you can get a Windows computer and run Ableton Live. Windows computers are less expensive than many Mac computers. Now, there's all sorts of nuance and argument here to be made on both sides because, well, you could always buy a used Mac. Then people will say, well, you could always build your own PC. You can go back and forth. I'm not here to start that argument. You guys can do that in the comments. But I'm just saying it's not as simple as Ableton Live costs more money because you have to have hardware to run MainStage or Ableton Live. But in Ableton Live, you can choose from a much wider range of computer options, both Mac and Windows. Still though, I will say that price is something to take into consideration. And obviously, if you already own a Mac computer, then it is more so about, do I want to spend $30 for MainStage or do I want to spend $400 or more to get Ableton Live Standard or Suite? So then sort of second to that, Ableton Live does come with a small sound library compared to something like MainStage, unless you do choose to buy the Suite version of Ableton Live. So if you're somebody who needs some done-for-you sounds, a big factory library to choose from, MainStage is definitely going to have more options for you, as would obviously a hardware keyboard. Now, that's not necessarily where this conversation has to stop though, because if you are interested in something like our Sunday Keys template for Ableton, it comes with tons of built-in sounds that we've actually programmed to work within Ableton Live Intro, Standard, and Suite. All the samples and presets you need are included in Sunday Keys. So you can get a huge range of sounds. Just don't expect to find that in Ableton Live Intro or Standard itself, unless you do either buy third-party plugins, build sounds yourself, or look into something like our Sunday Keys template. And then lastly, the last thing to consider, just like the MainStage side, just like any software rig, you wanna make sure your computer is up to the task of running this software. I always talk about how a hardware keyboard these days is just a computer in disguise without a big screen and without a keyboard. But the thing about a hardware keyboard is that computer has been specifically designed to be powerful enough to do everything the hardware keyboard claims that it can do. So if it tells you that you can layer 4 sounds at once, then the computer inside that keyboard is definitely going to be up to the task of running those 4 sounds at once. When it comes to using a software-based rig, oftentimes you'll be able to open the software on a computer that's underpowered, but then you won't know just how much you can ask of that computer until you start to run into problems. And the last thing you want for your live keys rig is to be worried about a crash or audio dropouts because your computer isn't up to the task. So you can check the Ableton website to see the minimum recommended specs for Ableton Live, but we always recommend going a little bit higher than those minimum specs, especially if you're going to be using this as a live performance tool. So the more RAM, the faster processor, a nice solid state drive. If you can afford those things in the computer that you use to run Ableton Live, then you're gonna be taking a step towards making sure that everything's gonna be reliable for you during a live performance. Okay, folks, so now I wanna hear from you. Are you using Ableton Live at your church already? Are you using it to run tracks? Are you automating lyrics or lighting? Or maybe you're already using it as the host of your keys rig. Because Ableton Live is such a wide open sandbox, there's pretty limitless potential in terms of what you can do, but there's also lots of roadblocks and barriers and knowledge gaps that you have to get over to find success. So leave the things that you have found to be helpful to you as a comment on this video. We'd love to hear from you. And then also, like I said at the beginning of this video, if you want, we have some free worship patches ready for you designed for Ableton Live. If you want to download those, there's a link in the description of this video. We'll also include a link in the description to our Sunday Keys template for Ableton Live. Like I said just a minute ago, if you want lots of done-for-you sounds without having to buy something super expensive like Ableton Live Suite, Sunday Keys for Ableton Live is a great option for you. So we'll put a link in the description there where you can see the sounds that are included, learn about the features, and figure out if it's a good fit for you. If you have any questions about setting up an Ableton Live keys rig, we'd be happy to help you out in the comments, and we hope to see you soon. Thanks for watching.